structure is more important than the average deal you do during the day. Um, like more millions will be made. Like I look at this agency here, more millions will have been made in some of the setup and structure than the actual day-to-day workload. Yeah.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. My guest today is Jamie Shanks. Jamie is a three-time agency founder who's seen it all. He pioneered the entire category of social selling with his first company, Sales for Life, scaling it to over 15 million in revenue and training 250,000 sellers globally. But what I find most interesting in his own description of his journey is where he says, I've had 2 first base hits, 1 bunt, 3 strikeouts, and is at bat big time with his new venture, GetLeverage. He's not some theorist. He's a practitioner who's lived the scaling journey, the wins and the strikeouts. Today, he's focused on a different kind of leverage, helping CEOs stop doing the $5 an hour tasks so they can create $500 an hour value by harnessing global talent. We're going to get into the lessons learned from those strikeouts, the blind spots most founders have, and what it really takes to scale. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Appreciate the invite.
You use this great baseball analogy to describe your career, and I love the honesty about that. 2 first base hits, 1 bunt, 3 strikeouts. Let's forget the hits for a moment. Tell me about the strikeouts. What are the lessons that you bring that help you now in scaling an organization?
When you create a new, let's assume the audience is starting a business from scratch rather than acquiring a business. The
Okay.
decisions you make up front around your partnership structure, and around the business model itself could be more important than anything you ever do to your products, your services, your go-to-market strategy, because in every instance, I made more money on the structure of how I set up the business or didn't set it up properly, and or chose a business model that was more inefficient. And I'll get into some of those examples. That
Sure.
cost me millions of dollars. Whereas winning a customer here, there, and everywhere is, those are just elements of growth along the journey. I can't stress the importance of, and I now kind of teach a concept where it's the 3 Ps. You need to think through your first principles. So you have your principles, you have the process to which you execute those principles, and then you have the platform and how you're going to do it. I'll give an example.
Okay.
We'll talk about a fail. In my first major agency, Sales for Life, a couple major mistakes. One, we had the opportunity early days to turn it into a recurring revenue business. We chose to focus in on project-based revenue that was more reoccurring. So 25% of the revenue would naturally recur because it had multi-year contracts. The rest of the deals you had to try to convince the customer to renew every single year. The thing about learning is it's a consumption-based asset where the vast majority of a sales organization will consume that intellectual property in year one, and a smaller cohort of new hires, usually 20% of a sales force, will be hired into year two. And so you have a smaller grouping of learning. So you actually have a natural downsell as you do it. So a couple of mistakes is we chose to be project-based revenues that had us hunting for new business all the time, rather than protecting the core business and kind of living on the residuals. And two, I was silly enough to not recognize the importance of what's called days sales outstanding. And days sales outstanding dictates that when you sign a contract, you're the provider of a service or product, and that's me, sorry, speaking, and then you are the person that's buying and consuming my solution. When you sign the statement of work and I countersign that statement of work, and I allow you to pay anything more then right now a clock begins and I become a bank and you owe me money. And I have to use my own working capital to fund the kickoff of your solution. So what happens is that upon day 30, you actually start a new clock. What happens is you used all your operating expenses to pay your staff, to pay your real estate, to pay your software costs from last month to collect money to pay for last month.
Right.
If you go into day 31, that's like your magic marker number. If you go beyond 30 days, 29, 30, 31 days, you're using a line of credit to pay for revenue you should have got 30 days ago. And so what happened with our business is we became millions and millions of dollars. What ends up happening is your accounts receivable start to swell. We'd wake up one day, we'd have a $500,000 or $1 million in floating accounts receivables with Microsoft, Oracle, Intel, Thomson Reuters, and they pay in, say, net 90. So I'm
Right.
using 3 months of working capital. And so I need to go become a bank. I need to have giant lines of credits worth $250,000, $500,000, $1 million line of credit to cover just to recuperate the money from 3 months ago. So it's actually the law of big numbers. The bigger you scale, the worse the problem becomes. So I I tell that tactical story because that's an example of if I had to set up the business from a first principle standpoint, we will be recurring revenue only, and we will collect money upon signature. Process. Process is that we are going to allow 0% of customers to pay any other way except on credit card. And now platform. Platform is we're going to use Stripe and WooCommerce to process that payment. So that's my existing agency, GetLeverage. And so over the years, those are some of the fails where I would break a first principle, I would bend a first principle, I would not outline then the process to achieve a first principle and then the platform of a first principle. And so now all of a sudden, if you bend a rule once or you break a rule once, now you've given liberty to everybody in the business to do it.
Right.
And now on my second agency, Pipeline Signals, I woke up, we'll call half pregnant. Half my customers were paying on credit card. Half my customers were paying via invoice. Those that were paying on invoice, I wake up at the end of a year, I had $150,000 in bad debt. I would take
Oh,
months and months to collect that money. Whereas when the customers are paying on credit card, they either paid on credit card or they don't get the solution. And so, anyways, that's an example of why Sales for Life became a first base hit instead of a second or third base hit. And that's why Pipeline Signals was a bunt and not a first base or a second base hit. It's documenting that structure in advance of starting the business.
that is a great lesson. The turns out the number one reason companies fail is they run out of cash. And you've pointed out growth actually creates a need for cash unless you've structured things the way you have. And I think that's a fantastic lesson. One of the first things I do when I work with CEOs is ask them, show me your cash flow forecast. Let's begin, understand that. So, yeah, really appreciate you sharing that. Now, in your book, you talk about founders getting stuck on low value tasks and suffering from margin erosion. So that sounds to me like a massive blind spot. So from your point of view, what's the biggest misconception or fear that keeps CEOs from leveraging global talent, causing them to pay, as you say, 5 to 10 times more per role than necessary?
Founders tend to make excuses for themselves why they don't do things. And again, back to a first principle. Why, as a founder, did you start this business? You started the business to probably give yourself financial optionality, to give yourself a potential for an asymmetric amount of money in the future and time, like to truly own your own time, be a king of a castle. And what happens is now you get into the business and you catch yourself doing everything. A lot of it is trust issues where you feel that nobody can do what you do, and you start to hire teammates to help you with certain things. And especially in North America, you'll start to hire teammates to do things, but you come to recognize that those in North America also want to work on the fun, exciting, strategic things. And as a generality, you start to question, well, who's actually doing the tactile work,
Right.
doing the tasks that nobody wants to do? But unfortunately, you know, everything is 20% of the workload is strategy, but it makes, if you do strategy right, it's 80% of the impact. But it's 20% of the work is the strategic insights needed to do something. But then it's 80% is the workload. And in fact, there's a great saying called the 10-80-10, which the role of the founder is the first 10% of a project is you're outlining the vision, the objectives, the milestones. 80% of the work gets done by others. And then you, the founder, come back for the last 10% to do quality assurance and make sure that it met the standards of the organization before you push it out. So what happens is founders get caught doing everything at go to market and in product and in finance and in HR. And then they start to try to hire around them. But also those teammates, at first, they'll pick up some tactile balls, but then they start doing strategic things. And everybody wants to work on the glory of strategy.
Right.
But now what's failing is the tasks, the task mastery. And so what happens is then the founder's overwhelmed and then they start making excuses. Well, offshore seems like there could be communication issues. There could be quality issues. There could be time zone issues. But if they back up to the first principle was if a corporation had a heartbeat and it had its own mind and it could speak, it would say the role of the corporation is to generate lots and lots of profit so that that profit gives you, the founder, financial optionality to kick out dividends to yourself and your family, to acquire new businesses, to launch new products and services. The more profit you have, the more freedom and financial optionality you have. But they forget that moment. They forget that, like, the whole reason I started this thing was to not be the worker bee.
Right.
That's just called a craft. That's a lifestyle. Like, that's the ultimate lifestyle business. Like, if you wanted to cobble shoes, you would cobble shoes, but you chose to grow a business.
That's right.
And so now you have to back up at a first principle and say to yourself, okay, I need to get a task done. Let's just pick a task. I need to have videos made for our website and social media. You have two choices. I can hire here in North America. That'll cost me $80,000 a year. I'm going to get a 25-year-old to do that work. And other than making the videos, like, what else are they going to do? Or I could spend one fifth to one tenth of that price to have the same outcome. And again, if I backed up and thought objectively, if the outcome could or should be the same, it would be insane for me to pay 10 times for that outcome. So let's just assume you have a 20% profit business. Every time you save $100,000, not only does that $100,000 go into your genes, but what you also forget is that you've created a tailwind or a headwind, however you want to think about it, of $500,000. So you need to go sell $500,000 worth of stuff to generate $100,000 in profit. So if you saved $100,000, well, you just relieved yourself of your sales and marketing team of $500,000 worth of workload that you've got to pile all this money in to go to market to make this machine grow. And that's always forgotten by the average founder. Like, it's if you use just like pure economics, most of the tactile things in your business, North Americans should not be doing because the labor arbitrage is so massive that it is the difference between you turning a profit and you having all this financial freedom and not.
I love that. And I'm a big fan of finding talented labor wherever it needs to be, as long as you have the systems in place to manage that talent. And another thing that I really like doing is asking the CEO to essentially ask this question of all the employees, which is, what are you being paid too much to do right now? And when they step back and look at that, they'll realize there are a lot of tactical things, as you were pointing out, that I'm being paid too much to do. If we can find somebody who's a lot more efficient, cost efficient to do that work, that goes straight to the bottom line, to your point.
Yeah, and we have an auditing document for this, and not even I'll use a position that I near and dear to my heart, the sales position, the account executive. It's not to ask them what they think is a $5 an hour task versus $500 an hour value creation. Follow them around for 1 week. So look at a sales process. A sales process, imagine a lead comes in and you're processing it, demo and discovery calls, you're building consensus with the buying committee, you're creating a proposal, you're crafting a contract, and you win the business. And there's lots of things that happen in between there. And if you were to follow an account executive around for the day, you catch them squirreling. I'll give you prime examples. Squirreling through LinkedIn to build lists of prospects, enriching inside HubSpot Salesforce, finding email addresses for a campaign they want to do, crafting copy to an email template. Um, those are examples of $5 an hour tasks. Whereas a $500 an hour value creation is the account executive using their 20 years of experience asking qualification questions on a demo and discovery call to suss out is this prospect medic qualified, as an example. That's worth $500 an hour. But these $5 an hour tasks typically equate to somewhere between 10 to 20% of an average seller's week. It's just filled with nonsense. Administrivia. Now, it's all part of the sales role of a salesperson, but that doesn't mean that that person should be doing it. And so if you go into every role, you will find that, they have the job of HR, but the real value of HR is like segmenting and filtering and doing diagnostic on talent acquisition and existing talent in your business. But like sifting through resumes, no, that's not worth $500 an hour.
Not
That
at all.
has to be peeled out.
So this brings us to our last topic today, and that's AI. So when you step back and look at jobs, it's typically true, with the exception of some jobs, it's typically true that a job itself is not going to be replaced. Rather, it is certain tasks within a job that might be replaced by AI. So when you think about AI, I can think of it potentially being a threat to your business, and I can think of how you might leverage AI to help it create great value for your company. So, talk to me a little bit about that because I could see both sides of the coin.
Yeah. AI is used by, we have 100 employees. It's used by every employee. 25% of their entire workflow process is done through AI. It is a pilot, is an accelerant for them right now. When we started this business, we started it during the creation and birth of AI. So we were intentional in the designing of the business model. The business model is outcome based. Customer wants tasks completed. So it's based on completion of tasks, not on headcount, not on time spent. So at the end of the day, the customer, they just want a video produced, or they want support tickets processed, or they want their CRM database cleaned up. They don't care how it gets done. In the short to medium term, I've gone through multiple evolutions. Saw the birth of marketing automation and the birth of social media and social selling. And what was very clear to me over my 20 years is human usage adoption of any technology is way slower than the speed of the Moore's law of the actual technology itself. So while AI in the news and in theory has evolving at a pace that is like eye-watering, when you actually go inside a business and see its use cases and how it's being adopted at such a slower pace. And history tells me that over the next 5+ years, AI is going to do these magical things. And it's not replacing anybody, but it's just making outcomes better, faster, cheaper, better quality control. It's going to be co-piloting. And for the next short to medium term, um, all it is a margin improver for me.
Now, what about those people who are, call it, getting paid $5 an hour to help look up that lead information? Do you encourage them to use AI? And if so, how does that change your pricing?
They use it every day, and my pricing is my pricing is based on outcomes. So
Right.
faster they do it, the more customers we can process with the same people.
Okay, so that's how you're going to leverage AI.
Yeah,
So,
we follow they're called mums and slums, which are these are measurements of units. Think of management units under management. So number of accounts and projects that a manager is leading, and then same with a slum. Slum is like service level unit measurements. And so it allows us to have more actions and activities, more accounts and customers per person. So the gross margins improve per person because they're able to process more work in a day.
I think that's fantastic. So, this is something I hadn't anticipated when I asked you the question that, well, it's because of your pricing model. And this goes back to what you said at the very beginning, setting up the structure of the organization.
Sure, is more important than the average deal you do during the day. Um, like more millions will be made. Like I look at this agency here, more millions will be made in some of the setup and structure than the actual day-to-day workload. Yeah.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for sharing with us and the audience some of the lessons you've learned. Tell us how people can reach you.
They can reach me on LinkedIn. It's Jamie Shanks. You'll notice, that baseball analogy in my tagline. They can also reach out to Get Leverage. Leverage is spelled LEVRG. And we are here to do all the go-to-market tasks for an organization.
Well, fantastic. I hope everybody looks you up to take advantage of what you have to offer. Very nice having you on the podcast.
Thanks a lot. You take care.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.